started coming out saying they were the most they were the evilest institution in the history of the world. Party of slavery from 1800 to 1860. The Party of the Confederacy from 1860 to 1865. The Party of Jim Crow from 1865 to 1965. Now the Party of transgenderism. The Party of atheism. Part of killing and murdering children up to the 9th month. An evil institution. All they do is meditate on blood. And people started checking. I said, check my work. And nobody could find a flaw in it. And said, oh my God. Found that the Nazi Party, what is Nazism? I'll tell you what it is. Nazism is using the government to elevate one race over all others. In Nazi Germany, what was that race? The Aryan race. They used the government of Germany to elevate the Aryans over all others, and they used it to subjugate the Jews and destroy them. The Democrat Party had been doing that for 200 years in America. The Nazis only did it for 20. If the Nazis were evil for doing it, why weren't the Democrats evil for doing it for 200?
Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome to the Stand on the Truth podcast, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. I am your host, April Chapman, and welcome to the show. Today, I plan to tackle a controversial. I know I'm smiling, right? But this is an actual controversial yet crucial topic that I honestly don't believe many people are going to be willing to accept. So first, I want to start off by asking if any of you, do you know the definition of Nazism? Like, what is the definition of Nazism? If you know what it is, write it in the comments below, or if you're watching this live, write and type it in the live chat. But if you are unfamiliar with the term Nazism, I'm going to tell you. Nazism is a worldview that uses the government to elevate one race over another. So in Nazi Germany, you had the Aryan race. They were the chosen race, if you will, and they were the race to be elevated above all others. And it was horrible. It was horrible. It was wicked. It was ungodly. It was just flat out wrong. But today I intend to prove the historical connection between the ideology of the Nazi Party in Germany and the Democratic Party here in America. Yes, you heard me right. I know that's a very bold claim, but if we dare to look at the facts without the blinders of political correctness, the parallels between the Nazi Party of Germany and the Democrat Party right here in America are both undeniable and deeply troubling. From policies that elevate literally one race over another to strategies of subjugation cloaked in modern day progressivism, we need to unmask what's really going on. And dear ones, it's been going on for a very long time. So let's take a look and explore the historical context of what I'm saying. We're going to examine the pre-1970 Democrat Party. If you're familiar, you probably already know this, but what was its foundation? Well, frankly, it was a party that unapologetically, they sought to elevate one race, the white American ethnicity. Sorry, I'm using the word race, but we really need to be intellectually honest. We need to change our vernacular and call it ethnicity. So the foundation of the Democrat Party, yes, was unapologetically, they sought to elevate one ethnicity, the white American ethnicity, over all others. The Confederate South, Dixiecrats, and the Ku Klux Klan, they were the military arm of the Democrat Party. They were not some fringe elements, but the core pillars of the Democratic Party's political machinery was the Dixiecrats, the Confederate South, Southern Democrats, and the KKK. Now, all of these groups together, which made up the Democrat Party, they loudly proclaimed their belief in white supremacy. They enforced it through Jim Crow laws that segregated society. It also stripped Black Americans of their basic civil rights. And the whole reason why we had a civil war to begin with that almost destroyed the Union was because Democrats loved slavery and felt it was good and right to subjugate and oppress Black people simply because they were Black. They believed that the African slave was not made in the image of God and was somehow less human than they were. Now, historically, the evidence of this systemic racial hierarchy, it could be and still can be seen everywhere. So if we're talking about pre-1970, you had segregated water fountains, you had whites-only signs, you had literacy tests to prevent Black people from voting, even after they were legally given the right to vote.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
All of this wickedness on the basis of ethnic superiority was all codified into law by Democrats. And it wasn't just codified into law by Democrats. It was publicly celebrated without shame. This was the America that the Nazis in Germany studied when crafting their own policies of racial subjugation. Now, Nazi Germany's inspiration is well documented. It is well documented that Nazi officials, when they were designing their racial policies to subjugate and oppress the Jewish ethnicity and Jewish culture, they looked to the Democrat laws here in America for inspiration. They studied segregation and the eugenics program spearheaded by Margaret, which promoted the idea of selective breeding. And this was done to maintain racial purity. Sound familiar? Just saying.
We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. I was escorted to the platform, was introduced, and began to speak. In the end, through simple illustrations, I believed I had accomplished my purpose. A dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered.
Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world.
These policies, they became the blueprint. These Democrat policies became the blueprint for the Nazis' own oppressive regime, culminating in the extermination of Jews during the Holocaust. Now here's the chilling truth. While the Nazis, they were defeated after 12 years of terror in 1945, what do we know about the Democrats? The Democratic Party system of racial oppression and this system of subjugation, it didn't die with them. The Democrats are still around, and their oppressive policies just continue to evolve. They are still alive. You guys, they are thriving. And their ideology, it has embedded itself in the political landscape of America as we know it. Now, let me give you some insight into some of the modern parallels. Let's fast forward to today. The tactics They may have changed. Like, you don't see the KKK walking around in hoods and things like that. We don't have Jim Crow laws codified on the books, but the agenda remains disturbingly similar. The Democrats, they no longer just say out loud, right, that they want to subjugate Black people or subjugate anyone. Well, sometimes they do, but for the most part, they don't. But their policies reveal the truth. Just look at the Black community. And then you need to ask yourself, are we better off under Democrat leadership? I don't know anyone that's going to say yes, right? They're going to say no. And in fact, many of the policies have devastated us. Let's take abortion as an example. The Democratic Party, in alliance and conjunction with Planned Parenthood, they have strategically placed clinics in predominantly Black communities. Now, Democrats love killing people in general, but when it comes to Planned Parenthood, it is a cash cow for them to sell abortion to the Black community.
Who was the real Margaret Sanger? Why was she heralded by the Third Reich as the greatest socialist in America? Why do modern Democrats who claim to support the African American population justify presenting her as a cultural icon? She is an icon to left-wing groups due to her founding of Planned Parenthood in October 1916 with her sister Ethel Byrne and Fanny Mendel, which was the first birth control clinic in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York. She then traveled the country preaching her concepts. Sanger then founded the American Birth Control League in 1921. Sanger also endorsed the 1927 decision Buck v. Bell, in which the Supreme Court ruled that states could forcibly sterilize people deemed unfit without their consent and sometimes without their knowledge. This American law would be the major defense at Nuremberg for the Nazi defendants who were doctors practicing Sanger's methods, and many would be found not guilty as a result of this defense. In 1939, Sanger began what was called the Negro Project, alongside Black leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. This was the plan to have Black doctors performing on Black patients to perpetuate the sterilization of Blacks who were deemed inferior, as many Black patients were suspicious of white doctors. Following upon Sanger's eugenics platform, disguised as giving women access to birth control, the ABCL became Planned Parenthood Federation of America in 1942 after birth control was no longer considered illegal, at least among married couples. During this period, Sanger had critics and supporters. The supporters even today claim that she condemned abortion, arguing that it would not be needed if every woman had access to birth control. What they leave out is that Sanger only opposed abortions if that meant not producing the best, healthiest, most intelligent from Caucasian couples. For Blacks, Jews, and brown-skinned people, as well as low IQ white people and those with birth defects, they were not to be allowed. This was what the Nazis adopted. Ironically, in 1966, Planned Parenthood began issuing its Margaret Sanger Awards annually to honor individuals of distinction in recognition of excellence and leadership in furthering reproductive health and reproductive rights. However, the organization very quietly and without any fanfare stopped this practice as Black Lives Matter rose to prominence. It would have been seen as the height of hypocrisy to have a liberal-backed domestic terror group that attacked white America connected to Sanger, a Democrat darling who wanted to exterminate Blacks. In fact, the last recipient of the award listed on the website is Dr. Willie Parker in 2015. Then it just quietly disappeared. Parker was an abortionist known for his contentious claims that his Christian faith influenced his work. He was accused of sexual assault in 2019, which he denied, but he still resigned from all of his professional positions in 2020. Other recipients of the Margaret Sanger Award include House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and actresses Jane Fonda and Katharine Hepburn.
They claim to champion choice, but the reality is far darker than this. Our birth rates, Black Americans, Our birth rate has plummeted. We are below 2.0, which means that we're literally being exterminated. But now we're being exterminated at our own hands, manipulated by policies that target Black women. How do we know this? You could go down to Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport and see how Planned Parenthood targets Black women in their messaging and their advertising and in their marketing. There are kiosks all over the airport that promote your choice, your body, and abortion at the freaking airport. But why is this? Why? It's because the Democratic Party, they no longer need our labor as they did during slavery and segregation. No, now their focus has evolved. It has shifted to extermination. The illegals crossing the border, they have now become the new voting bloc. And now we are being replaced. And too many of us, for some strange reason, I don't know why this is, but we are blinded to the fact that this is an agenda that has decades of proof behind it. Decades of proof behind it. You had the Negro Project that was spearheaded and the brainchild of Margaret Sanger, where she used Black preachers who she knew had a considerable influence in the Black community, and she used the Negro Project to sell extermination under the guise of reproductive health to the Black community by way of the Black church. It's still happening today. You also have the media's role. We cannot forget the role that the media plays in this. Just as in Nazi Germany, how they controlled the narrative to perpetuate their agenda, so too does the Democrat-aligned media function the same way today. They twist the truth. They rewrite history. And they send out their mouthpieces. You know, the Black figures who push the party's narrative, the Jerome Crow Negroes, that's what I like to call them. They send them out to do their bidding while ignoring the damage that's being done to our own communities. It's done right in front of our faces, and no one ever seems to question it. These figures are the modern day equivalent of the Jewish police in the ghettos during World War II. Those are the ones that carry out the will of their oppressors, all while wearing the face of the oppressed. Joy Reid, Roland Martin, Al Sharpton, Jamal Bryant, Raphael Warnock, they all look like us. Yet they are carrying out the will of their oppressors, and they're wearing the face, Jim Crow and blackface, of the oppressed. See what I'm saying? Barack Obama, another prime example. For all of his rhetoric of hope and change, his policies did more to entrench systemic poverty and broken families in the Black community than it did to uplift us, than it did to shed light on the fact that healthy families create healthy societies. You can't promote a concept of healthy families promoting healthy societies if you're too busy pushing for the rainbow cult agenda, which by and large, based on everything that it represents, is anti-human flourishing. You can't reproduce, right? So here's a call for us to be sober-minded. Sober-minded people, we can see what's happening, but too many of us remain blind. The Democratic Party has done an excellent job of making us believe that they aren't this evil. But history and their own policies tell a very different story. It is time for us to wake up. If Nazism is universally recognized as evil, why aren't we calling the Democratic Party out for embracing a similar mindset? Why do we excuse them? Their policies have evolved, but their goals remain the same: control, subjugation, and extermination. I want to read you something. I decided to do this topic because my dear friend, client, and mentor, Vince Everett Ellison, has written and speaks about this extensively. And it wasn't until he uncovered this connection between Nazi Germany and the American Democratic Party, it wasn't until he laid out this connection that I said, there it is. There it is right there. Let me just read you this excerpt from his book. His book is 25 Lies. If you have not heard about it, you are doing yourself a disservice. You need to own this book. This book is a blueprint, a manual, a reference tool to understanding how the Democratic Party, being the most evilest institution that probably has ever existed, how they move and what their tactics look like in the public square right under your nose that you've probably paid no attention to. But let me read this to you guys. The Democrat Party is not misguided. It isn't an American alternative. The Democrat Party leadership is evil and has been one of the most perpetually evil institutions in the history of the world. And now he's going to go on to defend this assertion. He says, quote, "It is universally agreed that the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, is also one of the vilest and evilest political organizations in history. How can the Nazi Party be evil and the Democratic Party not be?" That is a very valid question. He then goes on to say, in two separate discussions, the first, a piece from history.com referencing Yale University's James Q. Whitman, and the second, a seminar at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum co-led by USC Shoah Foundation's Wolf Gruner. Listen to this. The racism of the Democrat Jim Crow South, mistakenly called American racism, and Nazi Germany were compared and analyzed in an effort to help you understand how egregious the whitewashing of history has been. In each statement where the author mistakenly cites America as the racist party, in parentheses, besides United States, I will insert Democrat Party. Hopefully this will help correct the flow of disinformation. The Democrat Party, in parentheses, is not part of the original text. Listen to this. The History.com article explained it as, in particular, Nazis admired the Jim Crow era Democrat Party laws that discriminated against Black Americans and segregated them from white Americans. And they debated whether to introduce similar segregation in Germany. Whitman adds, the Democrat Party in America, this is in parentheses, in the early 20th century was the leading racist jurisdiction of the world. Emphasis mine, what I'm about to say here, they still are. They still are. And you only, unless you have eyes to see it, you will not boldly admit and proclaim this. But I do. It then says Nazi lawyers, as a result, were interested in, looked very closely at, and were ultimately influenced by Democrat Party race law. Democrat Party racial classification law was much harsher than anything the Nazis themselves were willing to introduce in Germany. In the movie Death of a Nation, Dinesh D'Souza makes the same observation. He said, quote, the Nazi Nuremberg laws were directly modeled on the segregation laws of the Democrat Party. Every segregation law was passed by a Democrat legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, and enforced by a Democrat official. As for the Democrat one-drop rule, y'all check this out. The Nazis founded two races even for them, end quote. Becky Little on March 20th, 2019, in a piece for History.com wrote, quote, when the Nazis set out to legally disenfranchise and discriminate against Jewish citizens, they weren't coming up with the ideas out of thin air. In particular, Nazis admired the Jim Crow era Democrat Party laws that discriminated against Black Americans and segregated them from white Americans. In The Nazi Connection, author Stefan Kuhl describes the impact the American eugenics movement had on Nazi thinking In Hitler's Ostrich and the Indian Wars, author Edward B. Westerman explores the similarities between the Federal Indian Removal Act, initiated almost exclusively by President Andrew Jackson and the Democrat Party, and Hitler's idea of Lebensraum, quote, living space. Jim Crow laws in the American South served as a precedent in a stricter legal sense. Scholars have long been aware that Hitler's regime expressed admiration for Democrat Party race law. Listen, they learned from the best. Hitler was evil. Absolutely. No one's going to argue that, but he learned from the predecessor of evil, and that was the American Democrat Party. Y'all, this is a heavy topic, but it's one that we cannot shy away from. History matters. The truth matters. And I know some of you are going to argue, well, that was the Democrat Party of yesteryear. They're not like that today. They're the party of the people. Really? Look at where they rule. Do they not resemble the Jewish ghettos of yesteryear? Where do they rule? What do you see? Poverty, crime, low educational standards. You think this is just by accident? This is just some big coincidence? No, it is not. It is the same. They don't want school choice. And if you dare mention the word school choice, find me a Democrat that is a champion for school choice, and I will find you someone that has renounced the Democrat Party and they've had to switch parties because their passion and their support of school choice compelled them to leave. All we got to do is talk to Misha Maynor. That's what caused her to leave the Democrat parties, because she opened her eyes and realized these people don't care about these kids. They care about power. They care about teachers' unions. They care about keeping Black people sequestered and oppressed and subjugated, because the longer they're there, the more power that they get. It's the party of the elite. Listen, as Christians, we're called to expose the darkness, and we're called to stand firm in the light. And so I'm covering this topic today. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I am just now scratching the surface. I just wanted to highlight, if it's okay to call the Nazi Party of Germany evil, why in the heck do we not call the Democrat Party here in America? Why don't we come with that same aggression and call them evil today if their tactics and their policies and the way they move in the world look really eerily similar? Why aren't we going on record calling them evil too? If you want to learn more about this and to explore and take yourself on a rabbit trail that you ain't gonna be able to get off of, listen, go on and get the book. I'm linking it and connecting it to this video because it is that important. 25 Lies, Exposing Democrats' Most Dangerous, Seductive, Damnable, Destructive Lies, and How to Refute Them by Vince Everett Ellison. It is a national treasure. It is a handbook into the wickedness and the evil that these people have been up to for over 200 years. Yet Nazi Germany, we want to put them as the high man on the totem pole for evil in the world of wickedness when they barely had a reign for 20 years, and Democrats been in power and they've been in existence for well over 200. So, if you found this episode helpful, if it forced you to think through some things, to draw you a list on a piece of paper and put the Nazi Party and the Democrat Party side by side and look at how they rule, look at how they function, look at their policies, and you do the research for yourself to see the similarities. And if I've sparked something in you and you found it helpful, if you found it useful, and if you have something to say about this topic, please join me down in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, you guys, grace and peace.